Matcha. Matcha is finely ground powder of specially grown and processed green tea leaves, traditionally consumed in East Asia. The green tea plants used for matcha are shade grown for 3 to 4 weeks before harvest. The stems and veins are removed during processing. During shaded growth, the plant Camellia sinensis produces more theanine and caffeine. The powdered form of matcha is consumed differently from tea leaves or tea bags. It is suspended in a liquid, typically water or milk. The traditional Japanese tea ceremony centers on the preparation, serving, and drinking of matcha as hot tea, and embodies a meditative spirituality. In modern times, matcha is also used to flavor and dye foods such as mochi and soba noodles, green tea ice cream, and matcha lattes, and a variety of Japanese wagashi confectionery. Matcha used in ceremonies is referred to as ceremonial grade, meaning that the powder is of a high enough quality to be used in a tea ceremony. Lower quality matcha is referred to as culinary grade, but no standard industry definition or requirements exist for matcha. Blends of matcha are given poetic names such as chame or tea names, either by producing plantation shop or creator of the blend, or by the Grand Master of a particular tea tradition. When a blend is named by the Grand Master of a tea ceremony lineage, it becomes known as the Master's Kanomi. History. In China during the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907, tea leaves were steamed and formed into tea bricks for storage and trade. The tea was prepared by roasting and pulverizing the tea, decocting the resulting tea powder in hot water, and then adding salt. During the Song Dynasty, 960 to 1279, the method of making powdered tea from steam-prepared dried tea leaves and preparing the beverage by whipping the tea powder and hot water together in a bowl became popular. Preparation and conception of powdered tea was formed into a ritual by Chan Buddhists. The earliest extant Chan monastic code, titled Changyan Qinghui, Rules of Purity for the Chan Monastery, 1103, describes in detail the etiquette for tea ceremonies. Zen Buddhism and methods of preparing powdered tea were brought to Japan by Eisai in 1191. In Japan, it became an important item in Zen monasteries, and from the 14th through the 16th centuries was highly appreciated by members of the upper echelons of society. Production. Matcha is made from shade-ground tea leaves that also are used to make gyokuru. The preparation of matcha starts several weeks before harvest and may last up to 20 days, when tea brushes are covered to prevent direct sunlight. This slowdowns growth, stimulates an increase in chlorophyll levels, turns the leaves a darker shade of green, and causes the production of amino acids, in particular theanine. After harvesting, if the leaves are rolled up before drying, as in the production of sencha, the result will be gyokuro, or jade dew tea. If the leaves are laid out flat to dry, however, they will crumble somewhat and become known as tencha. Then tencha may be deveined, destemmed, and stone ground to the fine, bright green, talc-like powder known as matcha. Grinding the leaves is a slow process because the millstones must not get too warm, lest the aroma of the leaves be altered. Up to 1 hour may be needed to grind 30 grams of matcha. The flavor of matcha is dominated by its amino acids. The highest grades of matcha have a more intense sweetness and deeper flavor than the standard or coarser grades of tea harvested later in the year. Tencha. Tencha refers to green tea leaves that may not have been ground up into fine powder as matcha, as the leaves are instead left to dry rather than be kneaded. Since the leaf cell walls are still intact, brewing tencha tea results in a pale green brew, which has a more mellow taste compared to other green tea extracts, and only the highest grade of tencha leaves can be brewed to its fullest flavor. Tencha leaves are half the weight of other tea leaves such as sencha and gyokuru, so most tencha brews require double the number of leaves. About an hour is needed to grind 40 to 70 grams of tencha leaves into matcha. And matcha does not retain its freshness as long as tencha is in powder form because powder begins to oxidize. Drinking and brewing tencha is traditionally prohibited by the Japanese tea ceremony. Grades. Commercial considerations, especially outside Japan, have increasingly seen matcha marketed according to grades indicating quality. Of the following terms, ceremonial grade is not recognized in Japan, but food grade or culinary grade are. Ceremonial grade. supposedly designates tea of a quality sufficient for its use in tea ceremonies and Buddhist temples. Almost always ground into a powder by granite stone mills, it is expensive. The unschooled drinker is unlikely to notice a large difference between ceremonial and premium grades. There is no distinct set of flavor characteristics designating the highest grade of matcha. Some matchas are conspicuously sweet, some can be comparatively bitter with other characteristics to compensate. The full suite of aesthetic properties such as flavor, color, and texture are important in the grading of matcha. All must necessarily be of quality that can support the making of koicha, the thick tea with a high proportion of powder to water, since this is the form of tea that defines traditional tea ceremony. Premium grade is high quality matcha green tea that contains young tea leaves from the top of the tea plant, best for daily consumption. It is characterized by a fresh, subtle flavor, usually perfect for both new and everyday matcha drinkers alike. Cooking culinary grade is the cheapest of all, suitable for cooking purposes, smoothies, etc. It is slightly bitter due to factors such as its production from leaves lower down on the tea plant, terroir, the time of harvest, or the process of its manufacture. In general, matcha is expensive compared to other forms of green tea, although its price depends on its quality. Higher grades are pricier due to the production methods and younger leaves used, and thus they have a more delicate flavor and are more suited to be enjoyed as tea. Like other forms of green tea, all grades of matcha have the potential health benefits and risks associated with the Camellia sinensis plant. The human clinical evidence is still limited. While the nutrient content varies depending on climate, season, horticultural practices, plant variety, manufacturing methods, and the age of the leaf, i.e. the position of the leaf on the harvest's shoot. Catechin concentration is highly dependent on leaf age. The leaf bud and the first leaf are richest in epigallocatechin gallate, but catechin levels vary greatly between plant varieties and whether plants are grown in shade. Chemical compositions of various grades of matcha were studied, with the results showing that the content of caffeine, free amino acids, theanine, and vitamin C decreased the decreasing price of matcha. Another study examined the chemical components of tencha, from which matcha is made, and showed that higher grade teas contain greater amounts of total amino acids, theanine, and other individual amino acids. On the other hand, the high grade teas contained lower amounts of total catechins than lower grade teas. Epigallocatechin EGC and epigallocatechin EC contents were greater in lower grade teas, while those of epigallocatechin gallate EGCG and epigallocatechin gallate ECG did not seem to correlate with tea grade, with a conclusion that the EGCG and EGC ratio reflected the quality of matcha more effectively than the EGC or total catechin contents. The relationships between the grade of tencha and caffeine content seems low. The chlorophyll contents were greater in the higher grade teas with fewer exceptions, likely related to the strong shading used to cultivate high quality tencha. The study also examined the chemical components of ceremonial grade tea matcha, industrial grade matcha, referring to powdered teas used in the food industry and cooking, and labeled matcha, and other powdered green tea samples like sencha and gyokuru. The prices of industrial matcha were under 600 yen per 100 grams. And the prices of ceremonial matcha were under 3,000 yen per 100 grams. On the other hand, prices of powdered green tea were over 600 yen per 100 grams. The prices ranged from 8,100 yen over 100 grams ceremonial grade to 170 yen per 100 grams powdered sencha. Samples of matcha for tea ceremonies were characterized by high content of theanine, under 1.8 grams per 100 grams, and the high ratios EGCG and EGC. On the other hand, for the industrial grade matcha samples and powdered green teas, the theanine contents and EGCG EGC ratios were under 1.7 grams per 100 grams and 3.3 grams per 100 grams respectively. The content of chlorophyll of matcha for tea ceremonies were over 250 milligrams per 100 grams, and most of the other samples were under 260 milligrams per 100 grams, although no difference was found between the theanine contents and EGCG/EGC ratios of industrial grade matcha and powdered green teas. The chlorophyll contents in industrial grade matcha tended to be higher than those of powdered green tea. Location on the tea bush. Where leaves destined for tencha are picked on the tea bush is vital for different grades of matcha. The young developing leaves on the top of the plant that are soft and supple are used for a higher grade of matcha, resulting in a finer texture and flavor. For the lower grades, older, more developed leaves are used, giving them a sandy texture and slightly bitter flavor. Traditionally, sencha leaves are dried outside in the shade and are never exposed to direct sunlight. However, driving now has mostly moved indoors. Quality matcha is vibrantly green as a result of this treatment. Stone grinding. Without the correct equipment and technique, matcha can become burnt and suffer degraded quality. Typically in Japan, it is stone ground to a fine powder through the use of specially designed granite stone mills. Oxidation. Oxidation is also a factor in determining grade. Matcha exposed to oxygen may easily become compromised. Oxidized matcha has a distinctive hay-like smell and dull brownish green color. Traditional preparation. The two main ways of preparing matcha are thin and, less common, thick. Prior to use, the matcha is often forced through a sieve to break up clumps. Special sieves are available for this purpose, which are usually stainless steel and combine a fine wire mesh sieve and a temporary storage container. A special wooden spatula is used to force the tea through the sieve, or a small smooth stone may be placed on top of the sieve and the device shaken gently. If the sieve matcha is to be served at a Japanese tea ceremony, then it will be placed into a small tea caddy known as a chaki. Otherwise, it can be scooped directly from the sieve into the chawan. About 2.2 to 4 grams of matcha is placed into the bowl, traditionally using a bamboo scoop called a chashaku, and then about 60 to 80 milliliters of hot water are added. While other fine Japanese teas such as gyukuru are prepared using water cool as low as 40 degrees Celsius in Japan, matcha is commonly prepared with water just below the boiling point, although temperatures as low as 70 to 85 degrees Celsius or 158 to 185 degrees Fahrenheit are similarly recommended. Usucha or thin tea is prepared with about 1.75 grams, amounting to 1.5 heaped shisaku scoop or about half a teaspoon of matcha and about 75 milliliters of hot water per serving, which can be whisked to produce broth or not according to the drinker's preference or to the traditions of the particular school of tea. Usucha created a lighter and slightly more bitter tea. Koicha or thick tea requires significantly more matcha, usually about doubling the powder and having the water about 3.7 grams of matcha and 40 milliliters of hot water per serving, or as many as 6 teaspoons to 3/4 cups of water. Because the resulting mixture is significantly thicker with similar consistency to liquid honey, blending is requiring a slower stirring motion that does not produce foam. Koicha is normally made with more expensive matcha from older tea trees exceeding 30 years, thus producing a milder and sweeter tea than usucha. It is served almost exclusively as part of the Japanese tea ceremonies. The mixture of water and tea powder is whisked into a uniform consistency using bamboo whisk known as chasen. No lumps should be left in the liquid, and no ground tea should remain on the sides of the bowl. Because matcha may be bitter, it is traditionally served with a small wagashi sweet intended to be consumed before drinking, but without added milk or sugar. It is usually considered that 40 grams of matcha provides for 20 bowls of usucha or 10 bowls of koicha. Other uses. It is used in castella, manju, and monaka as topping for shaved ice mixed with milk and sugar as a drink, and mixed with salt and used to flavor tempura in a mixture known as matcha gyo. It is also used as flavoring in many Western-style chocolates, candies, and desserts, such as cakes and pastries, including Swiss rolls and cheesecake, cookies, pudding, mousse, and green tea ice cream. Matcha frozen yogurt is sold in shops and may be made at home using Greek yogurt. The Japanese snack Pocky and Kit Kats have matcha-flavored versions. It may also be mixed into other forms of tea. For example, it is added to the genmaicha to form matcha iri genmaicha, literally roasted brown rice and green tea with added matcha. The use of matcha in modern drinks also spread to North American cafes, such as Starbucks, which introduced green tea lattes and other matcha-flavored drinks after they had become successful in their Japanese store locations. As in Japan, it has become integrated into lattes, iced drinks, milkshakes, and smoothies. Basic matcha teaware. The equipment required for making a matcha is as follows. Tea bowl, large enough to whisk the fine powder tea around 120 milliliters. Tea whisk, a bamboo whisk with fine bristles to whisk or whip the tea foam. Teaspoon, a bamboo spoon to measure the powder tea into the tea bowl, not the same as a Western teaspoon. Tea caddy, a container for the matcha powder tea. Tea cloth, a small cotton cloth for cleaning teaware during the tea ceremony. Health effects. As matcha's concentrated form of green tea, it has been long reputed by enthusiasts for centuries that matcha possesses stronger health benefits associated with green tea. Caffeine is more concentrated in matcha, but the main matcha constituent expected to have a stress-reducing effect is the theanine. Theanine is the most abundant amino acid in green tea, and together with succinic acid, gallic acid, and theogalin is what gives matcha its umami flavor. Compared to traditional green tea, the production of matcha requires the tea's leaves to be protected from sunlight. Shading results in an increase in caffeine, tolo-free amino acids, including theanine, but also reduces the accumulation of flavonoids in leaves. Theanine's stress-reducing effects were tested at Japan's University of Shizuoka School of Pharmaceutical Sciences, where studies showed that laboratory mice that consumed more than 33 milligrams per kilogram of matcha had significantly suppressed adrenaline hypertrophy, a symptom that shows sensitivity to stress. The School of Pharmaceutical Sciences also tested the stress-reducing effects on the university students and confirmed that students who ingested 3 grams of matcha and 500 milliliters of room temperature water had reduced anxiety, state trait anxiety inventory, or STAI, than students who consumed placebo.